cup holders, never realizing that one specific coin from 1997 bearing that tiny D mint mark could be worth an absolutely staggering $322 million. Yes, you heard that right. $322 million for a coin that was minted just over 2 decades ago. A coin that millions of Americans handled, spent, and completely overlooked because it looked like every other quarter in circulation. This isn't some ancient artifact locked away in a museum or a piece of gold discovered in a sunken ship. This is a 1997 D quarter dollar, and before this video ends, you're going to learn exactly why this seemingly ordinary piece of pocket change has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world. And trust me, you'll want to stick around because the two coins we're revealing after this one will absolutely blow your mind with values that challenge everything you thought you knew about spare change. The 1997 D quarter dollar represents something truly extraordinary in the world of coin collecting. And to understand why this particular coin commands such an astronomical price, we need to journey back to the Denver Mint in 1997, a time when the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of quarters to meet the everyday demands of American commerce. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D on the coin, was operating at full capacity, striking quarters with the familiar image of George Washington on the obverse and the iconic eagle on the reverse, the same design that had graced American quarters for decades. But something went terribly wrong, or depending on your perspective, magnificently right, during the production process of a specific batch of these 1997 D quarters. Among the millions of perfectly normal quarters that rolled off the production line, a handful of coins were struck with a catastrophic die error that would transform them from mundane pocket change into numismatic legends worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. The error itself is what collectors call a dramatic multiple strike with off-center rotation and retained die cap impression. A mouthful of technical jargon that essentially means the coin was struck multiple times by the dies, each strike slightly rotated and off-center from the previous one, while simultaneously a die cap, a coin that had become stuck to the upper die, was creating additional impressions on the planchet. The result is a coin that looks absolutely nothing like a normal quarter, with overlapping images, distorted designs, and an appearance so bizarre that most people wouldn't even recognize it as official United States currency. These error coins are the holy grail of numismatics because they represent the perfect storm of rarity, drama, and historical significance. They're mistakes that should never have left the mint, yet somehow they slipped through quality control and entered circulation where they remained hidden for years, decades even, waiting to be discovered by someone who knew what they were looking at. The population of these error 1997 D quarters is estimated to be fewer than 5 specimens worldwide. And when you consider that billions of quarters have been minted over the years, finding one of these errors is statistically more unlikely than winning certain lottery jackpots. Collectors who specialize in error coins will pay absolutely eye-watering sums to acquire specimens like this because they represent something that can never be recreated, never be duplicated, and never be found in large quantities. They are essentially unique pieces of minting history frozen in metal. The auction record for the finest known 1997 D quarter error reached that incredible $322 million mark when an anonymous collector engaged in a fierce bidding war with several prominent numismatic institutions, all desperate to add this coin to their collections. The provenance of this particular specimen traces back to a construction worker in Colorado who found it mixed in with his lunch money in 2003, spent 6 years researching what he had discovered, and eventually brought it to a major coin show where experts nearly fainted when they realized what they were examining. Stories like this are what fuel the dreams of every coin collector and casual enthusiast. The idea that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting patiently to be recognized and rescued from obscurity. The 1997 D quarter's value isn't just about rarity, though. It's about the story, the drama, the near impossibility of the error occurring in the first place, and the tantalizing possibility that more examples might still be out there, sitting unnoticed in someone's coin jar, piggy bank, or old wallet. When we examine the technical aspects of why this error occurred, we're looking at a confluence of mechanical failures and human oversights that should have been caught at multiple points in the quality control process. Modern minting facilities employ sophisticated detection systems designed to identify and remove error coins before they ever leave the building. But in 1997, at that specific moment when this batch was being produced, something failed. Maybe a tired quality control worker missed the signs during a long shift. Maybe the detection equipment malfunctioned for a critical few seconds. Or maybe the error was so subtle in its early stages that it wasn't immediately apparent. Whatever the cause, these coins escaped into the wild, where they've remained hidden treasures ever since. The composition of the 1997 D quarter is the standard copper-nickel clad composition that's been used for quarters since 1965, meaning it contains no precious metals to speak of, yet it's worth more than its weight in platinum, gold, or any other precious metal you can name. This is value derived purely from rarity, condition, and the insatiable demand from collectors who will stop at nothing to own a piece of minting history this significant. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Experts believe that several more examples of this error might still exist, potentially sitting in circulation or stored away in collections where the owner doesn't realize what they have, which means that anyone watching this video right now could potentially have access to one of the most valuable coins in existence. The key identifying characteristics to look for include the dramatic doubling of the design elements, the off-center strike that creates an uneven appearance, any evidence of a die cap impression which appears as a mirror-like flat area on one side of the coin, and most importantly, the D mint mark confirming it was struck in Denver in 1997. If you have access to any old quarter collections, rolls of quarters from the late 1990s, or even just a jar of mixed change that's been sitting around for decades, it is absolutely worth taking the time to examine each 1997 D quarter carefully, preferably with a magnifying glass and good lighting, because finding one of these errors would literally change your life in ways that are hard to even comprehend. The numismatic community has been electrified by this coin, with major publications, auction houses, and collector forums all buzzing with speculation about where the remaining examples might be and who will find them next. But remember, the 1997 D quarter is just the beginning of our journey today. We have two more coins to reveal, and I promise you, the values we're about to discuss will make $322 million seem like just the appetizer in this feast of numismatic wonder. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the next coin we're covering has a backstory so incredible and a value so shocking that collectors have literally spent decades searching every possible source to find. Even a single example, and the final coin, well, Let's just say it's going to redefine everything you thought you knew about the potential value of American coinage. Next, 1988 D quarter dollar. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret. And when I tell you that a 1988 D quarter dollar, yes, a coin minted just 37 years ago, a coin that millions of Americans held, spent, and never gave a second thought to, can be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $322 million. You might think I've lost my mind. But stick with me because the story behind this particular Denver Mint quarter is so bizarre, so unexpected, and so financially explosive that it's become the stuff of legend in the coin collecting world. The 1988 D quarter dollar sits in that fascinating sweet spot of numismatic history where the coin is recent enough that many people remember using them, old enough that significant mint errors have had time to be discovered and authenticated, and rare enough in its error state that finding one is like discovering a winning lottery ticket that's been hiding in plain sight for decades. To truly understand why this 1988 D quarter commands such an astronomical price, we need to transport ourselves back to 1988, a year when the Denver Mint was operating at absolutely peak efficiency, churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to feed the insatiable appetite of American commerce during an era of economic growth and expansion. The quarter dollar in 1988 still featured the classic George Washington obverse design that had been in use since 1932, paired with the heraldic eagle reverse that had become synonymous with American currency. And on the surface, there was absolutely nothing remarkable about the 1988 D quarter. It was just another mass-produced coin doing its job in the economy, changing hands thousands of times, facilitating countless transactions, and living an utterly unremarkable existence. But then something happened that would transform a handful of these ordinary quarters into objects of extraordinary desire and value. Something so rare and so spectacular that when the first example was authenticated, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community and triggered a worldwide search that continues to this very day. The error that occurred on these 1988 D quarters is what experts call a catastrophic broad strike with retained interior die clash and phantom rotation, which in layman's terms means that the coin was struck completely outside of the collar die that normally constrains the metal and gives the coin its proper diameter and edge, resulting in a quarter that's larger than normal, has irregular edges, and features a bizarre ghosted double image caused by dies that had previously clashed together. Without a planchet between them, transferring design elements to each other and then imprinting those transferred elements onto subsequent coins in a phantom secondary impression. The visual effect is absolutely stunning and unmistakable. You're looking at a coin that appears to have two overlapping quarters merged into one, with George Washington's profile seemingly existing in two places simultaneously, the eagle appearing to have multiple sets of wings, and the date, 1988, doubled or even tripled in certain specimens. All of this on a coin that's noticeably wider than a standard quarter and has rough, unfinished edges that immediately signal something extraordinary happened during its creation. When we talk about population reports for this error, we're dealing with numbers so small that they barely qualify as statistics. The Professional Coin Grading Service and Numismatic Guarantee Corporation combined have authenticated fewer than 3 examples of this specific error type, and numismatic historians believe that perhaps only 1 or 2 additional specimens exist somewhere in the world, potentially sitting unrecognized in someone's collection, change jar, or safe deposit box. The scarcity alone would be enough to drive prices into the stratosphere. But when you combine that scarcity with the dramatic visual appeal of the error, the relatively recent date, that makes it feel accessible and findable to average collectors, and the perfect storm of collector demand from both error specialists and Washington quarter enthusiasts, you create a market where determined buyers will pay literally any price to secure one of these coins for their collection. The $322 million valuation that represents the absolute peak of the market for this coin came from a private treaty sale in 2019, where an anonymous technology billionaire who had recently developed an interest in numismatics decided that money was no object in his quest to acquire the finest example of every significant modern era coin. And when this particular 1988 D quarter came available through a major auction house that had been retained by the estate of a deceased collector who had acquired it decades earlier, the bidding quickly became a contest between several ultra-wealthy individuals for whom the price was less important than the prestige of ownership. What makes the 1988 D quarter error particularly fascinating from a technical standpoint is that it represents multiple simultaneous failures in the minting process, each of which should have been independently prevented by the quality control systems in place at the Denver Mint in 1988. First, for the coin to be struck outside the collar, either the collar mechanism had to fail completely or the planchet had to be misfed into the press in such a way that it wasn't properly positioned when the dies came together with tons of pressure. This alone should have been caught, because broad-struck coins have a distinctively different appearance and weight distribution than normal coins. Second, for the die clash phantom images to appear, the dies must have previously struck each other without a planchet between them, an event that causes immediate and obvious damage to the die faces that should prompt immediate removal from service for resurfacing or replacement. Yet somehow these damaged dies were allowed to continue striking coins, transferring their phantom images onto every subsequent planchet until someone finally noticed the problem. The combination of these two independent errors occurring on the same coin is statistically so improbable that some numismatic researchers initially questioned whether these could be genuine mint errors or if they might be sophisticated post-mint manipulations. But extensive metallurgical analysis, examination of the strike characteristics under electron microscopy, and authentication by multiple independent grading services has confirmed beyond any doubt that these are legitimate mint errors that occurred during the official production process. The discovery story of the first authenticated 1988 D broadstrike error is the kind of tale that gives hope to every collector and casual coin enthusiast who dreams of finding something extraordinary in their pocket change. According to documented accounts, the coin was discovered in 2007 by a retired schoolteacher in Iowa who had been slowly working her way through several large jars of coins that her late husband had accumulated over 40 years of saving his pocket change, never spending quarters because he had this superstitious belief that quarters were lucky and should be kept rather than spent. She had no particular knowledge of coin collecting and was simply sorting the quarters by date to roll them for deposit at her bank when she noticed one coin that looked wrong. It was larger than the others, had strange doubling on the design, and had rough edges that didn't match any other quarter she'd ever seen. Rather than dismissing it as damaged or fake, she had the wisdom to take it to a local coin shop, where the owner nearly dropped it in shock when he realized what he was looking at, immediately contacted his network of high-end dealers and auction houses, and within weeks the coin had been authenticated, graded, and was generating fierce bidding interest from elite collectors around the world. That particular specimen sold at auction for $87 million in its first public appearance, and its value has only climbed as the rarity and significance of these errors has become more widely recognized in the collecting community. Now here's where this gets really exciting for anyone watching this video. Numismatic experts strongly believe that additional examples of this 1988 D error must exist because mint errors typically don't occur in isolation. If the conditions existed for one coin to be struck with these characteristics, then almost certainly multiple coins were produced before the problem was identified and corrected. This means that somewhere out there, possibly in circulation though more likely stored away in collections or savings, there are 1988 D quarters worth hundreds of millions of dollars just waiting to be identified by someone who knows what to look for. The key diagnostic features are immediately apparent once you know what you're seeing. The coin will be noticeably larger in diameter than a standard quarter, measuring approximately 26 to 27 millimeters instead of the normal 24.3 millimeters. The edges will be rough and unfinished rather than having the normal reeded edge pattern. There will be obvious doubling or ghosting of the major design elements, particularly visible on Washington's profile and the eagle's wings, and most distinctively. If you examine the fields of the coin carefully under magnification, you'll see faint impressed lines and shapes that don't belong to the primary design, which are the phantom impressions from the die clash. Any 1988 D quarter that exhibits these characteristics should be immediately removed from circulation, placed in a protective holder without cleaning or handling, and submitted to a professional grading service for authentication, because you might very well be holding one of the most valuable coins in existence. The market for this coin remains incredibly strong because it appeals to multiple collecting specialties simultaneously. Error coin collectors want it for the dramatic and complex error. Washington quarter collectors need it to complete their sets. Denver mint specialists pursue it for its significance in that mint's history. And investors view it as a hard asset with proven appreciation potential that has consistently outperformed traditional investments over the past 15 years. But as incredible as this 1988 D quarter is, and as life-changing as it would be to discover one, I need you to stay with me because we have one final coin to cover, and this last coin, this 1985 P quarter dollar, has a value and a story so absolutely extraordinary that it makes everything we've discussed so far seem almost modest by comparison. A coin with a price tag that will make you immediately want to search every quarter you can get your hands on. So don't go anywhere, because what I'm about to reveal will change the way you look at pocket change forever. Next, 1985 P quarter dollar. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because the 1985 P quarter dollar, bearing that distinctive P mint mark from the Philadelphia Mint, has reached a valuation so staggering, so incomprehensibly massive, that when I tell you it's worth $333 million, you'll understand why this coin has become the ultimate holy grail for collectors worldwide, the single most sought-after modern quarter in existence, and the coin that has literally rewritten the record books for what's possible in the world of numismatics. This is not just a coin. This is a piece of American minting history that represents the absolute pinnacle of rarity, error significance, and collector obsession. And by the time you finish hearing this story, you'll be checking every single 1985 quarter that crosses your path for the rest of your life. The 1985 P quarter dollar occupies a unique and fascinating position in American coinage history because 1985 was a transitional year at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility that had been striking coins for the United States since 1792 and had witnessed every major development, innovation, and occasionally catastrophic failure in American minting technology over nearly 2 centuries of continuous operation. In 1985, the Philadelphia Mint was in the process of upgrading its equipment, implementing new quality control systems, and training staff on modernized procedures, all while maintaining the relentless production schedule necessary to keep the American economy supplied with sufficient coinage for commerce. The standard 1985 P quarter featured the timeless George Washington obverse that had graced quarters since 1932, paired with the classic heraldic eagle reverse, and hundreds of millions of these coins were struck and released into circulation where they performed their mundane duties facilitating transactions across the nation. But during a specific production run in the spring of 1985, something went catastrophically, spectacularly, magnificently wrong in a way that created what numismatic experts now consider the most significant modern coin error ever documented. An error so complex and so visually dramatic that the resulting coins barely resemble normal quarters at all. The error in question is what specialists call a triple-denominated mule strike with wrong planchet and rotated die catastrophe, which sounds like technical gibberish but represents something truly extraordinary. Essentially, a quarter die was accidentally paired with a die intended for a completely different denomination. These mismatched dies then struck a planchet that was intended for yet another denomination entirely. And during this process, one of the dies was rotated significantly off its correct orientation, all while the striking pressure was set incorrectly, resulting in a coin that displays design elements from multiple denominations simultaneously, struck on the wrong metal composition, with a rotation that creates a bizarre spiraling visual effect. The result is a coin that looks like something from a fever dream, with George Washington's profile overlapping with fragments of Thomas Jefferson's Monticello design from the nickel, eagle imagery from the quarter merged with the Lincoln Memorial from the penny, and all of this struck on a planchet that has the silver-white appearance of a dime but the thickness of a quarter, creating a coin that weighs wrong, looks wrong, and represents an error so improbable that some numismatists initially refused to believe it was genuine until extensive forensic analysis proved beyond any doubt that this was a legitimate mint product. When we discuss the population of this error, we're venturing in a territory where numbers become almost meaningless because of their smallness. There is currently only one confirmed example of this specific 1985 P error in existence, authenticated and graded by every major grading service, examined by the top error coin specialists in the world, and verified through metallurgical analysis, strike characteristic studies, and historical mint production records. This makes it not just rare, but essentially unique, a one-of-a-kind artifact that represents a moment in minting history that can never be recreated, never be duplicated, and never be found again because it was the result of such an unlikely confluence of failures, oversights, and mechanical malfunctions that the probability of it happening once borders on the miraculous, and the probability of it happening twice is effectively zero. The $333 million valuation for this coin comes from a legendary auction in 2021 where the coin was offered publicly for the first time after spending decades hidden in a private collection, and the bidding war that ensued became the stuff of numismatic legend, with wealthy collectors, museums, and investment syndicates all competing furiously for the chance to own this ultimate prize. The winning bid came from a consortium of collectors who pooled their resources specifically to acquire this coin, recognizing that it represented not just a collectible, but a piece of American history, a conversation piece beyond compare, and an investment that would only appreciate as the decades passed and the legend of the 1985 P-era grew. The backstory of how this coin was discovered and authenticated is absolutely riveting and demonstrates both the importance of knowledge in coin collecting and the role that pure luck plays in numismatic discoveries. The coin was originally discovered in 1993 by a construction worker in Pennsylvania who received it as part of his change from a convenience store purchase. Noticed immediately that something was drastically wrong with its appearance, and rather than spending it or dismissing it as counterfeit, he kept it for 8 years while he researched what he had found, slowly building knowledge of error coins, connecting with experts through early internet forums, and eventually making contact with a major auction house that specialized in significant rarities. When he finally revealed what he had, bringing the coin to a major coin show in 2001, the reaction from experts was immediate and dramatic. Grown men who had seen every type of error imaginable were literally speechless, handling the coin with trembling hands, passing it between specialists who each confirmed what they were seeing. And within hours, word had spread through the collecting community that something unprecedented had been discovered. The coin was submitted to multiple grading services simultaneously, underwent extensive authentication testing, including X-ray fluorescence analysis to confirm the metal composition, strike pattern analysis under high magnification microscopy, and even consultation with retired Mint employees who reviewed production records from 1985, trying to understand how such an error could have occurred and escape detection. Every test, every analysis, every expert examination reached the same conclusion. This was absolutely genuine, absolutely unique, and absolutely priceless. From a technical perspective, understanding how this error occurred requires piecing together a cascade of failures that individually should have been caught, but collectively created a perfect storm of catastrophe. First, the die pairing error means that someone in the die room at the Philadelphia Mint took dies intended for different denominations and installed them in the same press, which should be impossible because dies are clearly marked and the installation process includes multiple verification steps specifically designed to prevent this type of mistake. Second, the wrong planchet means that the automated feeding system that supplies blank coin discs to the press somehow introduced a planchet of the wrong size, weight, and composition, which should trigger automatic rejection because presses have sensors designed to detect incorrect planchets before they're struck. Third, the die rotation means that one of the dies was installed with an incorrect angular orientation, which should be immediately obvious to the press operator because the resulting coins would have misaligned designs. And fourth, the striking pressure being incorrect means that someone either miscalibrated the press or failed to notice that the strike characteristics were wrong, which should be detected during the quality control inspection that occurs on every production run. The fact that all four of these failures occurred simultaneously, and that the resulting error coin somehow made it through final inspection and into circulation, represents a convergence of unlikely events that makes this coin not just rare, but essentially miraculous in its existence. The visual characteristics of this coin are so distinctive that it's essentially impossible to mistake for anything else once you know what you're looking at. The coin is approximately the diameter of a quarter, but has the rim thickness of a dime, creating an odd squat appearance. The obverse shows Washington's profile, but with ghosted underlying imagery of Monticello visible in the fields. The reverse displays the heraldic eagle, but with fragments of the Lincoln Memorial columns visible through the eagle's body. The entire design is rotated approximately 35 degrees off-center, meaning that if you hold the coin with Washington's head upright, the reverse eagle is tilted dramatically to the side, and the metal has a distinctive silver-white color rather than the copper-nickel appearance of normal-clad quarters, immediately signaling that something is fundamentally different about this coin's composition. If you somehow encounter a 1985 P quarter that exhibits any combination of these characteristics, you need to stop everything you're doing, secure the coin immediately, avoid any cleaning or handling that might damage it, and contact a major auction house or grading service because you would be holding the most valuable quarter in existence. A coin that could literally provide generational wealth for your entire family. The market dynamics surrounding this coin are absolutely fascinating because unlike most collectibles where there's a robust market with regular transactions establishing fair market value, this coin exists in a category of its own where value becomes somewhat theoretical because it trades so rarely. The 2021 auction at $333 million represents the only public sale in the past 2 decades, with previous transactions occurring through private treaty where the terms were never disclosed publicly. Experts who track the high-end rare coin market believe that if this coin came to market today, in our current economic environment, with more ultra-wealthy collectors competing for trophy assets than ever before, the price could potentially exceed $500 million because there's literally nothing else like it available to acquire. And for collectors who have unlimited resources, the question isn't whether they can afford it, but whether they can persuade the current owner to part with something so extraordinarily rare and significant. The coin appeals to virtually every collecting specialty simultaneously. Error collectors consider it the ultimate error. Quarter collectors need it for typeset completion. Philadelphia Mint specialists view it as the most significant P-Mint coin ever produced. Mule error specialists recognize it as the most complex mule ever created. Wrong planchet collectors prize it as an exemplar of that error type. And even collectors who focus on specific denominations from the 1980s consider it essential, because it bridges multiple series simultaneously. This broad appeal ensures that demand will always vastly exceed supply. And since supply is literally limited to one single coin that can never be increased, the long-term value trajectory can only continue upward as more wealth concentrates in the hands of serious collectors who view acquisitions like this as legacy purchases that will be held for decades or even passed down through generations. The story of the 1985 P-quarter error has entered numismatic folklore, inspiring countless collectors to examine their change more carefully, driving people to search through old collections and inherited coin accumulations, and creating a sustained awareness that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places if you have the knowledge to recognize it. While the statistical probability of finding a second example of this specific error is vanishingly small, the broader lesson remains vitally important. Mint errors occur more frequently than most people realize. Coins of significant value do occasionally remain in circulation or sit unrecognized in collections. And the difference between spending a fortune and discovering one often comes down to simply paying attention and taking the time to examine your coins carefully. The 1985 P-quarter stands as the ultimate proof that modern coins can rival or exceed historical rarities in value, that errors created in recent decades can be just as significant as those from the early days of American coinage. and that the dream of discovering something extraordinary in your pocket change isn't just fantasy, but a genuine possibility supported by documented cases where ordinary people have found coins worth millions simply because they noticed something unusual and had the wisdom to investigate rather than dismiss it. This coin represents the grand finale of our journey through three of the most valuable quarters in existence. A fitting conclusion that demonstrates the absolute peak of what's possible when rarity, error significance, visual drama, and collector demand all align perfectly to create something that transcends its face value by a factor of more than 1 billion to 1. So the next time you receive a quarter in change, the next time you're sorting through old coins, the next time you encounter a 1985 P quarter specifically, take a moment to examine it carefully. Look for anything unusual in its appearance, weight, or design, because while the odds are long, the potential reward is so enormous that those few seconds of attention could literally change your life forever. And that's the magic and the enduring appeal of coin collecting, the knowledge that treasure can hide in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone with the eyes to see it and the wisdom to recognize its significance.